Hello everyone and welcome to the Recursive podcast. Our next guest is a bold dreamer. When Martin Vechev graduated computer science from Cambridge University, he dreamt of creating a world-class research center in his homeland, Bulgaria. Today, his dream is a reality. Martin is the architect of the Institute for Computer Science, Artificial Intelligence and Technology, called INSAIT, in Sofia. The Deep Tech Institute was created in collaboration with two of the leading tech universities in the world, in Zurich and Lausanne. It is supported by tech giants like Google, Amazon, DeepMind, the Bulgarian government, Bulgarian company SiteGround, and also local entrepreneurs. Martin Vechev combines several unique talents. He is a tech entrepreneur, a professor at ETH Zurich, and an award-winning researcher. His efforts in the field of building secure and fair artificial intelligence. He has co-founded 3 startups in the area of safe AI, blockchain security, AI for code. He has exited 2 of them successfully. And today we want to take a look inside his mind. Martin, welcome to the Recursive podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You have been in the news lately quite a lot. We have read interviews with you. We know a bit about your story, but somehow I think for especially the local community, your personality still remains a bit elusive. And this is why today we invited you to talk a bit more about your path so far, how it all started here in Sofia, but continued all around the world. So I'm going to, do an experiment with you and throw you back a lot in time, back to your childhood here in Sofia. I read that your mother was a musician and she actually wanted you also to become a musician. How did it go?
Right, my mother is a musician in piano. She's been doing it for many years. She used to teach at the Bulgarian Music Conservatory in Sofia. And later she finished her doctorate PhD in Moscow Conservatory. I was playing piano since I was small because for obvious reasons.
Since you were 4?
Since I was 4. So I played for about 4 years, so a couple hours a day, with the intention of becoming a professional pianist. Then in around grade 3, when we moved to Russia, actually, I lived 3 years in Russia, 3 years and a bit in Russia, and there I actually started playing cello. So I did piano for 4 years, and then I did 3.5, 4 years also of cello. Okay. So different instruments, different ambitions of the parents.
Well, I guess becoming a musician requires a lot of resilience and also a lot of persistence. So it probably develops certain talents that you could make use later on. Do you think that somehow music and math have something in common?
Well, I think what I got out of the music, so I think we need to be precise in the sense that many people say they play music, but it depends how long you've played it and in which way you've played it, right? So I played it quite seriously, and I think if you're doing something, whatever you're doing, you need to commit to this and do it seriously. So I think if you're involved with music for a long period of time seriously, like playing a few hours a day, you learn a lot. So you learn, of course, discipline, consistency. In music, what's very interesting is that if you make a mistake, everybody can hear it. Even people who are not musicians, they can notice that something is off with the sound, and so you kind of learn that you kind of get aware of this fact. So be careful, how you do things. But in terms of when I switched more to mathematics in grade 7, what I found was, in some sense, I didn't like music so much, so that's why I was looking for something else. And when I switched to math, what I found out was that math was actually easier for me. And the reason was that this effect of when you're doing something and when everybody gets noticed that you did that, like playing an incorrect sound, you cannot see it in math. You solve a problem, but if you cannot solve it, you can try again. Nobody's like looking at you all the time, what mistakes you're making. So math, in some sense, was kind of you can work at peace without people hearing or looking at you all the time what you're doing.
Okay.
So in that sense, it was very liberating.
I always thought that math requires you also to be very precise and not to make mistakes, but...
Yeah, math requires you to be precise, and both require you to be precise. But math, you can focus over a long period of time, solve a problem, and nobody's looking over your shoulder while you're solving it. While in music, when you're solving it, when you're learning, everybody can hear.
I see.
So this is interesting.
Did you have some kind of like a role?
But of course, in math, also one of the big things in music is you need to focus over a long period of time, playing some pieces like etudes, which are not super pleasant, just mechanically so that you can learn the movements. And so if you do that as a kid over kind of a long period of time, you learn to do things which may not be so pleasant, but that help you. So that was something in music, I think, that I learned well.
I think you learned discipline in the hard way.
Yes, in the hard way, yes.
But yeah, math can be actually quite pleasant. I always had these moments also. When I was at school, so my parents are both mathematicians, and math was an important topic at home. And I think this is why I got a bit of pressure when I was a bit younger. But I still really much enjoyed coming after school and then solving, all my homework. It was kind of a meditative state. Now I'm a bit sorry that I didn't continue on this path looking at people like you. Definitely you're an inspiration. Tell me, was there some kind of role model or a mentor that you had for the world of math?
For the world of math, so I would say my biggest role model when I was growing up in the area of just the exact sciences, like computer science or informatics, was my uncle. He was a scientist. He worked here in Bulgaria, also specialized outside Bulgaria. Okay. And later he created a very successful company in Bulgaria. So I grew up with him, talking about these themes, talking about these topics. So ever since I was fairly young, let's say around grade 7 maybe, I would hear those stories around these kinds of world-class institutes, like the Livermore Labs or the Xerox PARC or the IBM Watson Research Center, and what they do and what great things they do. And so I was kind of always dreaming to be in those places. So first time I went actually to IBM TJ Watson Research, where I worked as first as an intern, then as a researcher. When I started my PhD, I actually took hundreds of pictures. I couldn't believe that I was there because I had heard about those places since I was very small.
But you chose computer science.
Right.
Were you actually good at math, or were you better at programming? Is there a difference in the skills that you need from your perspective?
I liked math. I was good at it for what I needed. I actually focused mostly on math when I was in high school, in the Sofia Math High School. I really liked that. But I was also exposed to the tech world from my uncle. I met a lot of the people, what they were doing. I would look at them. They were, writing these programs. I would look at them. I remember going there. I couldn't understand what these guys are doing, but it looked like magic. I was like, wow, these guys are so good. I always wanted to work with them. But I was like, I don't know how to do this. And then, so I focused mostly on math. And then in the university, I kind of, switched to computer science more.
At what stage did you had a grasp of what technology could do for the world, and I don't know, how it will basically transform the way that we live entirely? I think back then in the days, maybe we couldn't really grasp the potential impact of
when I was a small kid, we used to go and play video games in my uncle's lab in Technical University of Sofia with my cousin, his son actually. And they actually built computers. They built like a computer, they built the software. So you'd look at those things and I couldn't believe it. So this looks so formidable, so huge. Like, oh man, this is something big. It's like amazing. And so it stayed in my mind at that point that this could be really, really very game changing somehow. But mostly for the people, not for like the impact of the technology on the world, mostly getting inspired by the people, looking at those people, wanting to be like them. This I think was definitive for me. Only later, maybe after, the last year of university, you'd see, okay, this can be, dot-com boom or whatever at that time, or just working on projects. Then you'd say, maybe, this can be game-changing here and there.
What was your favorite video game back then? Do you remember?
My favorite video game back then was The Digger.
The Digger. Oh. Later on, you moved to Canada.
I moved to Canada, yes, when I was 17 for a few years. I did my undergraduate there, my undergraduate degree. And then in computer science and a bit of math as well, did a lot of math courses. And then, but still see that dream when I wanted to work with those people I mentioned to you in my uncle's lab, specific people, that was always my goal, not to be in Canada. Okay. So around 2-3 years into my bachelor, I got an offer to work in Sofia with those people. Okay. And I couldn't believe it because my uncle said, hey, want to work with Peter? Peter was the name of the guy, Peter Petrov. He's an amazing, amazing person. I thought these guys are gods. Like, I couldn't believe I would go to work with them. So they said, come to Sofia. That was 1999. In August, I remember when I came. I said, work with them. And I said, of course I'll come. I'll take a year, or whatever, semester off from the university in Canada. Wow. So I met that guy. I was like, wow, this guy is now finally real. And then that was the big change for me also. I was what did you learn by working so close with this kind of people?
With this kind of people?
Lots of things. I mean, independence, technical, they're amazing people technically here in Bulgaria. He was a great mentor for me. I learned a lot from him. Just technically would work on hardcore stuff like writing operating systems, virtual machines, debuggers, really, really hardcore software building from the ground up. They were creating boards like, hardware boards, and you'd get exposed, to the whole range, the whole technical range of computing. And this was from the ground up, and this was very valuable for me, starting from the ground up, building up. At that point, application software was just very, very kind of, it was considered easy in some sense because you're starting really from the building, the boards, the operating systems, the virtual machines, and on top of that, maybe the applications, which was much easier. So I started in that culture, which I think was great for me. Gave you a lot of grounding, technical grounding.
It's actually kind of surprising for someone who then later on continued an academic path because you took a break from university to go to work for amazing people in Bulgaria, in Sofia.
That was my dream, to go to work with those people. And I actually, at that time when I was in Canada, I was making a lot of money doing websites. My mom was wondering if I'm doing something else because you'd get checks like $2,000 a week or something. And then, my uncle told me, come work with those people. So I dropped everything. And asked, well, how much money I'm going to make here in Sofia, right? I said, well, you're going to be making like €150, 300 leva a month.
Oh, my God. Well,
and I said, but can I keep my other job to make more money? He said, no, you need to focus. So I dropped everything, and I was working nonstop with this person. And then I did that, came back to Canada, finished my degree, and then I came back to Bulgaria for another 2 years working with him.
But before that, you had some other weird jobs. I mean, I
worked all kinds of jobs in Canada to make money.
Tell me, what is the weirdest job that you had in Canada?
It was, from delivering newspapers and dogs chasing after you to cooking chocolate to, carrying boxes at the marketplace. When I was like teenager, still 17, 18, I used to do these things to make money, to pay for the university. We didn't have any money.
So you didn't necessarily grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth?
Definitely not.
I see. Okay. You came back, you finished university, you're undergraduate. At what stage did you decide that you're going to follow the academic path?
Oh, actually, when I did my last year, when I did my university degree in Canada, I really didn't want to do PhD or graduate work. Professors would ask me, hey, you want to do PhD? You're doing well. I say, no, I definitely don't want to do this. Those guys are spending time writing papers, doing all kinds of useless things. I really want to build systems. I want to be an engineer. So I definitely don't want to be doing this. So I say, no, I'm coming back to Bulgaria. I'm going to work with Peter. And people are like, what is this guy talking about?
300 leva a month.
But it was a great decision for me, following the passion and following where you can learn the most. So I didn't care whether it's like, Bulgaria, or whether it's like Canada, or whatever. It's like, I thought that in Bulgaria with this guy, I can learn a lot. And this was true. It was not just him, it was the entire team there. Amazing people. And I came back and I learned a lot. But of course, we were working on, with Peter and the company, we were working on very technical projects. And I was reading a lot of papers. Like we were building at that time a Java virtual machine. For instance, we built the first Java virtual, the thing that runs Java. So everything from the ground up, making it work on different platforms like ARM, like the digital signal processors, hardcore building stuff. And what I found out when I was doing this is I had a lot of technical holes to fill because you start reading scientific papers because, you have to take the idea and then implement it, make it work. And so this was around 2001 to 2003. I said, well, I was hitting some of these problems and I was reading some of these things. I was like, I have no clue what the heck these guys are talking about in these papers. No idea. How am I going to implement this? And then I was reading lots of papers. I had a desk like this of scientific papers when I was still an engineer. And I say, hey, look, I really want to deepen my knowledge. And then I decided to do the PhD that way. So it was really more of like on a need to learn basis. Again, just like I came from Canada to Bulgaria to get my engineering skills higher, to learn these fundamental things like in engineering. The same way I wanted to and I had a pretty good life in Bulgaria, frankly, at that time. But then I went to the UK, to Cambridge, to do my PhD.
Tell me about Cambridge. I think this is like one of those institutions that we know mostly from the movies, and we have this romantic idea of how it is to be at campus and to have these amazing people there living next to you. How did it feel for you? How was it? Tell me about the first time
when I went to Cambridge, I wanted to. When I left the company, where I was doing a very interesting work, I think, honestly, at that time, and maybe even still, it's one of the most interesting works you can do in Bulgaria. In fact, some of the people I work with there at this point now are directors in big companies in Bulgaria. Some of them went very high positions abroad. It was a big decision to leave. And when I went to Cambridge, I went with the idea to go to one of these research labs that my uncle had told me. I said, hey, look, I'm going to learn stuff, but then I'm going to get some results out, publish some papers, so I can get positions in those research labs, like the IBM Watson Center, or like the Livermore, or like Microsoft Research, and those places. Go to research labs where you can do research and engineering together. That was what I wanted to do. And so when I went to Cambridge, I told my advisor, my professor, I said, hey, that's my goal. That's what I want to do. And then he said, well, good luck, have fun. So, well, give me the topic, and then I'm going to work on this topic. I'm going to get those papers, and I'm going to go fulfill my goals, right? So, that's not how it works, my friend. That's not how it works. You have to come up with a topic yourself. I said, well, I have to come up with a topic. I said, but I don't know anything about this topic. So how should I say? I don't know. Like, you should read and you should think. And so it was very shocking to me the first 3 months there, 4 months there. It was really just sink or swim, as they say in the lab there.
So you don't get the problem solved, but you have to find it yourself.
Yeah, you have to find it yourself.
So you have to learn to ask the right questions.
Yes,
right?
you have to. It's kind of like the movie Beautiful Mind. The guy's like thinking about. And so I was sitting there, sit all day and say, what should I work on? And say, well, I'm reading this problem, that problem, that problem. And then I had read like hundreds of papers, and I remember like 4 months in, I came back to Bulgaria and I was talking to Peter, in the company for 2 weeks. He said, what you're working on? I said, I don't know. I'm just thinking what to work on. He said, okay.
Wow.
So I'm sitting all day in this lab and I'm reading papers. I'm thinking what problem to solve. So I say, oh, this is an interesting problem. And then I look it up and people have solved it. And then I look at this problem and say, people have solved it. They say, well, what am I? And so then I learned that a lot about, work in general is about problem definition, not about problem solving. Problem solving is there, but problem definition is so important. But you learn it the hard way. And then, of course, time went on. In that same group, actually, Bjorn Strusup had done his PhD, the guy who invented C++, right? And actually, next to me was Eben Upton. He was one of the creator of Raspberry Pi, if you've heard about this, right? So they were all there. And you also see like people doing great. They're like working on papers. Like, what are you doing? It's like, well, I'm producing these great papers. I was like, man, what am I doing? I'm just reading papers. I'm like, what am I going to do here? And then at some point, it's a defining moment because many people quit. That's what people don't see. It's a very high pressurous environment with really smart people. Some of the best people in the world are there thinking about problems. a lab which is like, constantly like this, working basically all day, all night, see you just in this environment. It's not like 9 to 5 job. You go in the morning, people are there working. You go in the evening at 12 o'clock, people are there working.
It sounds almost a bit obsessive, like in the Beautiful Mind.
It is very upset. Those places are really all in. You cannot do this without being all in, like hardcore in. And then at some point, so Cambridge was like this. And at some point, I kind of relaxed about it. I said, look, maybe I'm just not going to come up with anything. They're just going to kick me out in a year. I'm just going to, go back to Sofia.
So you accepted your failure?
I said, look, I said, look, this is just, how am I going to come up with, some great... And the thing is, I would come up with a problem. And I said, hey, I finally found something. I can write a paper about this, And the advisor would say, this is a good enough result, but not for Cambridge. So think.
So after how long of thinking? How much time?
About 5-6 months.
So after 5 or 6 months of thinking, you came up with a problem.
I came up with a problem,
but it wasn't good enough for Cambridge.
I constantly came up with some problems, but they were not good enough. They said, no, this is good. I said, how is it not good enough? Like, well, and then at some point I relaxed. I said, look, just relax. There is you need to, I think that's a very important thing I learned there. And later on, you need to embrace chaos. You need to embrace non-determinism. The fact that it's so undefined, that it's so unclear what to do. You're thinking about a problem. You're entering into the gray cloud where you don't know what you're doing. You need to embrace and you need to relax and to think systematically in this chaos. And then I did that, and I came up with a good problem. And then that was it. And then it took off from there.
I liked what you said, embracing chaos. Just recently I was reading something about it, that in life it is a very important moment. It's a moment of maturation where you actually accept this chaos in the world, inside you. And I think for someone who is coming from exact sciences, this can be very challenging.
It's very challenging.
I'm not entirely in exact sciences. I've never been a scientist, but growing up with mathematicians, there was a very clear structure between right and wrong and what we do and what we don't do. And I studied then actually, how do you call them? Human science, social studies in Austria. And that was a shock for me because, okay, I'm starting with one theory and it sounds actually very plausible. And then you move to the next one and this sounds also very plausible. And then you have this pluralism of theories. And I was like, okay, but you have to tell me which is the theory which you're going to work with. And it was very confusing. How can it be that you have so many perspectives? And the same happened to me in life. So I guess accepting this kind of chaos and finding yourself in it can be a very maturing moment.
Yes.
So you had it, how old were you back then?
25, 26.
Okay. At some point you probably found your problem that was good enough.
Yeah, good enough.
Okay. You successfully also graduated at Cambridge.
Yes.
What happened then?
Well, then I during the PhD, during the doctoral studies, I again had this thing in my head. I want to go to these labs. So I was like, I want to go to the labs. So I contacted those people when I was, people do internships one day, PhD students. So I contacted those people. And for my amazement, in this particular lab where I really wanted to go, this person replied. His name is David Bacon. He's now at Google, one of the highest paid employees at Google. He was at IBM Research at that time, in Watson Research. And he replied, he said, hey, you're in internship, come over in the summer, let's work together. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
I said, what the? So what? So
what was so special about your email? What do you think?
I don't remember. I just said, I'm a PhD student in Cambridge. I want to work with you. And I have some ideas. And then he said, okay, let's start working now. And we actually started working right away. And he made me an offer. And then I went for an internship at IBM Research that year, the first year actually in my PhD. And then I did a bunch of internships there, things progressed. And this is what I said, like also about the institute and so on, all of the people I grew up with, kind of academic friends and buddies at that time, and the connections for Cambridge, and then the labs, when you go to IBM Research at that time, you would have, as an intern, you get all the best students, PhD students in the world are there. You'd have 60, 70 interns from like MIT and Stanford and so on. And all these guys now are, professors or like directors of the research centers. And so I met many of them there. At that time, we would be together, living in the same house, doing research together. And, just some amazing people, And I think in these places, Cambridge or the IBMs, interacting with these people, you always see people who are extremely good in one thing. And no matter how hard you work, you're never going to be like this. But you have your own things, you're good at those things. And so you have no choice when you go to these places to kind of learn to work with people because they're just really good at this, you're really good at that. And then you kind of learn to work together. And this was also very useful building up experience for me, being in the center, seeing now the researchers on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so I finished there, did a bunch of internships, in Cambridge, of course, a PhD. And then I was like, wow, I actually had, when I finished the PhD, I had academic interviews at, top places my PhD was quite good. And I had this top academic interviews around the world, and I said, no, I'm not going to go to the interviews because I want to go to IBM TJ Watson Research Center. I said, how can you not go? I was like, what? I said, no, I can't. I want to work there. I want to work with those people. And then I went there after PhD.
You had probably some expectations of how it is going to be. You mentioned that already your uncle was actually telling you about these centers. He was never there. He had just learned about their work. He met them at conferences. And then, of course, I was an intern there, so I knew many of the people. Mm-hmm. And if you do well, then you do the interviews, they make you offer, you go there. Mm-hmm. So it was great. But was it at the level of your expectations? Oh, yeah. Or it was even better? It was fantastic. It was fantastic. What's so fantastic about this place? The people. Only the people. All these things are the people, Mm-hmm. There's nothing fancy about the buildings. There's nothing fancy about anything. It's just you meet amazing people who are really so good. Do they help you? Do you support each other? Do you help each other? Okay. At that time I met one of my very close collaborators. He's actually on the supervisory board of INSAIT, Irina. Mm-hmm. When I was an intern, I had this problem, and we were looking who to work with on this problem there. And I met Iran, and I was like, I was talking to him, and this guy started disagreeing with me. He's like, no, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. I was like, who is this guy? Who the heck is this guy? And then we really got along. We became buddies. We get very close friends. And then he was there. And it was an amazing group, one of the best in the world. Really, just fantastic group of researchers. And in this institute, there's only PhDs. People have PhDs working and interns. Mm-hmm. Amazing group. People who have changed science, computer science. You look at the people and say, this guy invented fundamental result in computer science. He's next door, and this guy invented this, and this guy. You're looking, I was like, I don't know. Don't you feel in a way like an imposter? Is my place really here? Well, when you go as an intern, you do feel that. And funny thing is, when I went there, I met the person. I was like, wait, this is Dave Grove. I was reading his papers 3 years ago in Sofia. Is that him? I was like, let me touch it. Let me touch it. Oh, amazing. Yeah. What happened to the engineer in yourself, inside of you, who wanted to build stuff? So, that was the thing about the research labs, that you do science and you do engineering together. Okay. This is what I always wanted to do. You come up with the idea and the prototype, and then you build it up, and then and so invent new science and then implement it too as an engineer. So I was doing both. So I was very happy doing this in this group of people together. It was wonderful, really. I think it's and many of the leading technological figures have actually gone for IBM Watson Research Center, IBM Almaden Research, or some of the IBM research centers. Mm-hmm. It's hard to describe how good this is when it works. It's just. You can just talk to people, come up with ideas, game-changing ideas basically on the fly, new ideas and new ideas. It's great. Fantastic place. What we also know about you is that you co-founded 3 startups, 3 deep tech startups. Right. 2 of them were already sold. Yes. Right. Yeah. So in a way, you're a very successful serial entrepreneur next to your academic path. Yes. I think this is very impressive. How did you learn to be an entrepreneur? Because I think it is an art in itself to learn how to build a company, especially when you have this academic background. Okay, you probably learned how to work on problems. You probably learned also how to work in a team, but building a company is a totally different thing. Right.
So I think with the companies, I never planned to do this. I never cared about creating companies. I never cared. But looking back now in retrospect, I remember seeing my uncle with his company in Bulgaria, how things went. And I remember when the company started, when there were 5 people, 5 amazing people, and then they would, grow, become bigger. So I remember, looking it through the years. So it's kind of like you learn some of these things by osmosis, by exposure. But I never wanted to create companies. It was never my goal. I didn't care about this. After IBM Research, when I went to academia, and the reason why I left was because I wanted to work with students. I wanted to build I really enjoy working with students, like with the smartest, I think, one of the best students in the world, and these talented people, and just help them, develop their potential. Mm-hmm. And that was my goal in the university. I really want to do world-class research with the students. I really enjoy this. I love this process. And these kids are super smart. They're all smarter than me. They're all smarter, and they're just so good.
Do you learn from them as well?
Of course, yeah. These are like amazing people. You cannot not learn from them. These are some of the best students in the world. They come. They have so many ideas. I look at myself when I was a PhD student. I was like, wow, these guys are really good. And they do things that you I couldn't do when I was a PhD student. I was like, and of course that's how it is. They always have to get somebody better in certain ways. I'm better in other ways. I try to help them. Ideally, they get much better than me. But by the time I was there, by the time I was 29, they get and they're great. And I love doing this. But I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just wanted to make impact for science and for the students. Now, of course, when you do certain kind of work, there is opportunity for impact through the technological entrepreneurship, creating companies and impacting the world at large. And that's how the companies came about. We never created the companies to make money or anything like that. We just said, hey, this thing we came up with, it can impact the world, everybody. And so let's do it. Let's just create a company. And we learned as we go all these skills.
This makes total sense, because if the research that you're doing somehow stays in the academic environment, the impact is in a way limited. I mean, it's out there, but it's waiting for someone, maybe an entrepreneur or a corporation, to pick it up and then to commercialize it. But you dare to go on this path yourself.
I went myself, but also with other people who are more operationally involved on a day-to-day basis, like Deep Code, for instance. Me and Veselin, who was my PhD student, founded it. But I remember some of the calls. I can tell you very funny stories. We have a call with investors because we're like, we have this amazing product, we have this amazing ideas, blah, blah, blah. And that person was like, that's good. It's like, in 40 minutes went by, and we're like, do you have any questions about our product? He goes, I have, who's the CEO? And then we were very lucky.
Smart investor.
So, at that time, we were very lucky also that, we had a CEO, Boris Paskalev, came. He was fantastic. Also, he did bachelor's at MIT, then 20 years in the business. And, together, me, Veselin as a technology officer, Boris as a chief executive officer, me more on the advisory academic role. It was really great. So it's fun.
So you get funded by private investors? It wasn't part of somehow structure of ETH?
We put our own...
How do you find funding for a deep tech startup, for instance?
First of all, we always put our own money down.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
We put, for a seed round, me and Veselin and Boris then put the money down.
Okay.
So I said, we put some amount, good seed round. And I actually didn't have much money at the time. I say, we'll put it in. And I think you have to, because if you're asking money from people and you believe in the idea, you need to say, I put my own money down, right? I believe in this.
You have the skin in the game,
yeah? Yeah, I have skin in the game. So I put it down, and that was that. And then we get investors, like the normal thing that people do, seed round, Series A, and so on.
Isn't it a bit different to look for funding for a deep tech startup, because the incubation period is usually longer?
Right. I think this is one of the huge advantages that these institutions like the ETHs or the Stanfords or MITs have. The amount of technical knowledge that exists there in a single group like our group is just cannot be described. It is just massive. And so the incubation period, if you want to call it, has kind of happened on the scientific side already during the PhD. Veselin or other people who work on this topic. And then when you start a company, you already have like a pretty good idea what you're going to build, what your competitive advantage is. We already know that, and it turned out this way. And I think that's the huge value of these institutions, these universities, which are, I think there's a common mistake. They are not really universities per se. They're more like institutions. They have academic part, they have startups, they have investors, they have this, they have so many things. And so when you see them as an ecosystem, then you kind of start understanding what's happening more. So I think the incubation period for deep technology companies happens more during the research phase, which is usually in these institutions. And then when you already have like a pretty good idea of the product. And then
And these institutions, they also remain on your cap table?
That depends what you license. If you license some IP from there, then yes, they're on your cap table. If you don't, if you just you learn a lot of things and then you make a company, then they don't. But they help you anyway.
They help you?
They help you.
To have a great impact on the world.
Yeah, they help you.
I guess that makes sense. It's a KPI for them as well, right?
KPI for them, for the students. Like we have a very deep pipeline of students from the universities who are specially trained in the courses that exist there. You cannot just get like a random student in these companies. And then, of course, when a company grows, there is positions for everybody. But the bootstrapping period, these places are really uniquely situated to do properly.
Remembered this morning when I was prepping for the conversation that there was this trick where in your life when you want something to happen and then you have to put it on a paper, maybe hide the paper somewhere.
Right.
And it's somehow, it's like magic when you have this idea in your mind and the universe is helping you to achieve that.
Yes.
And I was making this association because of the story that you shared before about the INSAIT Institute, that it actually started already with applying at Cambridge and you put it on the paper there because you were, okay, this is what I want to do.
Right.
I guess back then at this point you didn't really have a clear idea of how this is going to happen. You traveled the world, you've been in these institutions, you saw how they worked, you collected ideas, you saw also what doesn't work.
Right. Yeah.
And at some point now we see that this idea became reality.
Right.
By the way, congratulations. I think you inspired a lot of people here in the region with this achievement, although the big work becomes it starts now.
Yes.
So tell me about the structures that you have been observing, the things that inspired you to then build the architecture of INSAIT as it is now.
Well, INSAIT is, so first of all, with the writing, I agree with you. It makes a lot of sense. I think the higher order bit here is that you declare to the world what you're going to do, because this binds you to this decision.
Okay. It makes you accountable for it.
You're accountable for it. So you cannot just, I'm going to do this. You have to say, like, I'm going to do that. And even if it fails, it gives you the best chance. You shouldn't be afraid to fail. You either make it or you learn something. Okay. So I think that's very important. Be very explicit about the expectations. We were very explicit always with the companies and everything that you do. Now, as far as the structure with INSAIT, it kind of has a lot of the good things, we hope, from places like from Cambridge, from IBM Research, what I mentioned in New York, from ETH, from my US experience in the US. I've also participated in a lot of the grant programs there, creating the grant programs that professors later apply to. So I have a lot of experience also in the tech world with investors now. So it has a lot of these things that are baked in there. It's
an amalgam of so many different models that you have been observing. Okay.
But more or less, I think the analogies, and I think it's always good to have analogy, it's going to be like this. It is similar in structure and in operation to a top computer science department like ETHs or MITs or Stanfords. Okay. Because those departments are basically themselves institutions. So if you can make something like that, then you'll be good.
Would you say that it's the first time that a structure like this has been established here in our region?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Nothing like that exists. there's so many important pieces in that structure to make it work. Like, I'll give you an example. At ETH, I think ETH has surpassed Stanford at some point for the number of deep technology companies. But in 10 years there, in our computer science department, I've never heard somebody talk about startups. Nobody has, it's not in the value system of the place.
Okay.
So nobody will say, hey, you did fantastic work because you have startup for 1 billion. It's like, whatever. People want to, the value of the place is about learning, about teaching, about creating new science. And startups is one of the many ways to have impact.
Yeah, because like a place like MIT is a breeding ground for all those startups that we now know who have been...
That's a side effect.
That's a side effect.
Side effect.
So it's like a vehicle to commercialize, to have an impact in the world from... Okay.
Yes. It's really more like, the mindset is like, we're going to do great work. We're going to do great science. We're going to build great people. Oh, and by the way, some of them will create startups. Some will go to research labs like IBM's or DeepMind's or whatever. Some will become professors. But these are like, we'll make great courses, we'll make them public. People are thinking about impact.
Okay.
And that's one thing I learned also in IBM research when I was working with that person, David Bacon. I remember when I came as a fresh student, PhD student, this, I would work very hard, very, very hard. And I saw many people working very hard. And I remember this guy, he was like always, talking to people. And one time I went to him, he was my mentor, kind of an informal PhD advisor. And I said, hey, David, do you ever work? Like, how do you ever get anything done?
Okay, and then great question.
I said, how is this possible? And then he goes, look, many people are working on solving their own problem. They're working very hard. I'm thinking what the right problem is. So I'm spending 7 to 80% of my time thinking about the problem. Why should I solve this problem? How should I solve this problem? And I think this kind of thing, this kind of culture is also fundamental to those places. So those people are always thinking about which problem, why should I solve this problem? That's really what the culture is, and then they solve it.
How was talking to people helping him?
Because he exchanges ideas, he bounces ideas. I say it doesn't really ring through. There is no buy-in, there is no mind share. It's like, let's say the best case scenario, I solve this problem. Let's say I make this startup. It's like, okay, you make some money, but this is gonna change things. Like, it doesn't ring true. So let's think again. It's
actually also something that entrepreneurs themselves can learn from this model, because I think especially in the early stages of a startup, of a company, you really need to be open to others and exchange about your ideas so that you have a better grasp of, are you really solving a problem of, for a big problem, for a big market? Is it plausible that you're going to solve it this way?
Right.
And especially when you're a young entrepreneur, maybe a bit immature, you're a bit afraid to ask those questions. So it's actually very brave to open up and to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. What do you think? And people can crush you.
I got, one thing you learn in this place is you're going to get crushed most of the time.
Okay.
90% of the things you say are going to be nonsense. And people are going to tell you this is nonsense, this is not going to work. You have to think again. So you need to be prepared for this. That's part of the culture. That makes it hard for some people. But this is why I think fundamentally people who create startups from these places, for them it's like a natural, there is nothing really fundamentally new. It's the same process. Identify pain point, convince people about the idea. World-class research has all these things baked in already.
What about ego in these places?
That's a major one. Yeah, there is certainly that. Especially when you get, people who have, many of these people you see at these places, you look at their career trajectory, they haven't had mistakes since they were small kids, just stellar throughout. And so definitely there is that involved, but I think that it really depends on the person. I think the best people are very open. They're very open. They are working very well with other people. For instance, in my group, things are very flat. Everybody can come in. We can discuss anything. Because ultimately, the fundamental goal is to create people who are better than you. And so that's our goal. It's like I want to see somebody who is like 28. He's like much better than when I was when I finished Cambridge. That's the goal. That's the thing that we want to do. And so the ego is not really. It's not really part of the game for us. We have very clear.
I think you have to come very much in terms with your ego to be in an environment like this.
That's certainly something when you join these places. You know, that's the first shock. You know, you see people who are, no matter where you come from, they're just going to be people who are very good at stuff that you're never going to be as good. And so you have to think, what am I good at? What can I? And there's always something that you can be good at, better, and you know this, and not just to be better, but to make your contribution, to be able to work with them, and then you grow in this way. And of course, you fill in the holes. You know, you get better in the things you were on, and then that's how you grow. That's the way it is. I'm
actually surprised how many parallels I see from the models that we have in the entrepreneurial world and from what you're sharing about the academic one, which I think for many of us is a bit fuzzy and unfamiliar. And in a way, now that I mean, we've been talking with you even before that, that INSAIT as a project it is also a risky project. Yes. It is like a startup. So again, you declare to the world that you're going to do that. You did it very vocally. Now it's not only written somewhere in a paper in your drawer, but it's in the newspapers and it's in the news and everywhere. So I guess you will be held very accountable for what follows now. Tell me about the risk that you're taking and how do you deal with that, and which are the major challenges that you see in front of you now that it's been established, it's there, you got the support from the government, you got the support from so many entrepreneurs who believed in the idea, although you actually didn't know them. I'm sorry, I'm going back to the question, but that was a surprise moment for me that, you know, Martin Vechev, you know, this artificial intelligence guy, computer science guy from ETH is coming now here and he wants to do that. And I guess you knew a lot of people in Bulgaria before because you were always culturally connected, but I wouldn't say necessarily that you had this, you know, big network. And then you come here and then you talk to 4 governments and you talk to entrepreneurs. You had a meeting with the founders of SiteGround and you convinced them of something which at this point was probably not even on paper. It was more or less in your head. Oh, how did you convince them?
It's actually, you know, I think I don't have to do much because, again, by analogy, you know, you look at MIT, you look at ETH, you look at Stanford, you look at Technion in Israel, you look at those places, and you ask yourself, do you want to have something like that here in Eastern Europe, in Sofia? Because there's nothing like it, not even close, right? And so, and people say, yeah, I know, they're intelligent people, they're smart people, they're familiar with the landscape. So, oh, this is amazing. We want to have something like that. Well, INSAIT, the goal of INSAIT is to be something like this. So, would you like to help this cause? And they say, yes, I want to help this cause. Now, of course, it's more than that because by the time I met them, we had already worked on it for a few years, like with the ratification, with the governments, with the commitment from the government, the $100 million from the big tech outside. So there was already a lot of basis. It was not just, hey, you know, here's a high-level idea. A lot of work had been done. And probably also they see in me somebody who knows what they're talking about. And, you know.
So you identified again an important problem, a pain point. Okay. So what comes now in front of you? What comes ahead? What are the challenges that you're supposed to face with INSAIT? And you still continue to be a professor at ETH, so you have to mix the two.
I think the main challenge for this institute, all these top places, is people. Can you hire amazing people who can work in the institute? So everything you see, Google, DeepMind, SiteGround, the funding, the money, the commitment for 10 years, all this stuff, these are all like implementation details to be able to tell the person, hey, you know, look what we have here. At the end, you need to hire the best people. And this is the biggest challenge. It may come down not just to the institute. They may say, hey, no, I don't like healthcare in Sofia, or I don't like something, right? Oh, I really like something else, right? So getting those people, I think, is the biggest challenge. Now, of course, there is a sub-challenges like the laws in Bulgaria may not be, ideal for academic promotions, how academics work, and so on and so forth. How the money are spent, which the government gives. Many of them can be spent for salaries and rent and places, but some require like public, public procurement, right? Yes. Which may be slow. So that's why you need actually investor money so that you can spend quickly. Okay. So you need to speed. These places move very fast. I think that's the other thing that, if you look at a startup, even the best startups don't move faster than these places. Like the speed at which they operate, these academic top institutions is very fast. It's just very, very fast. And they're like startups basically internally. And so the speed is very important. It's not enough just to hire 1, 2 people. The speed has to be high. So can you get the speed to get the top people? That's the biggest challenge always. Whether we'll be able to attract, and everything we did, the commitment, the money, the entrepreneurs, the funding, the ETH EPFL partnership, the future partnerships, they're all done with the purpose to create better conditions for really good people to come. PhD students, master students, professors or researchers. That's it.
Because of the massive brain drain that we had in the region, and it's not just Bulgaria, it's Romania and Greece and everywhere, we've been speaking a lot about bringing back those people. And I think we focus a lot of initiatives there on this one, but when you do initiatives like INSAIT or, world-class innovation, you actually need to attract the brightest minds from anywhere in the world, regardless of their background. And actually, the more diversity you have, the better, because then you have this really amazing teamwork. Have you had the first conversations with people who are, let's say, not Bulgarians, not Romanians, who might be interested in joining INSAIT? And yes. Is it difficult to convince them to move to a place like Sofia?
It's definitely, this hiring in this computer science AI space at the level of, researchers or PhDs, the top ones, it's really probably the most competitive market in the world. Because those people, if you look at something like the MITs or ETHs, again, a professor there is almost like an institution. There's so many connections, so many students, so many things happening. So, put 40 of them together. This is just, you're bringing like a massive ecosystem, place. So hiring there is very challenging. I've already had conversations informally, and there is some interest, and I'm hoping that we'll announce some of them soon.
Oh, looking forward to the news.
I think
very exciting.
Surprising.
Yes, very exciting. Yes. You still have, so you're still a full-time, how is it called? Full-time professor? No, full professor.
I'm a full professor at ETH.
You're full professor at ETH. You're running this actually quite impressive startup called INSAIT. You have a family and 2 kids. How do you manage so many, how to put it, how do you manage all this work around you? It's probably also fun for you to be in this environment, to work fast, to be challenged all the time. But what is your life hack? How do you sustain the energy and the mental power to manage all that?
Well, seeing like, the kind of family I grew up in, we haven't discussed this, but, my mother, my uncles, grandparents, they work very hard. And one of the things I was taught as a kid is that you don't really have a lot of time for impact. You have finite energy. You need to move very quickly because time is over, and then you have very little time. So I'm always living under this motto. We don't have a lot of time. We have one life. We have very little time. You have to move really fast.
Okay.
It's kind of like the slogan of Facebook at some point. So move fast and break things. I don't want to say break things. Hopefully, we don't break anything. But you gotta move fast. And there's no choice. You have to do it.
Isn't that a lot of pressure to live in with this constant feeling that you're running out of time?
No,
No?
I think if the expectations you have of yourself are higher than anybody else's, then there is no pressure.
Cool.
So I don't feel any pressure from anybody. But still, one thing it's important is that I'm not doing this myself, everything myself. There's a lot of people who are behind this. There's hundreds of people who have helped INSAIT, whose names are not even public. In the government, in the prior governments, hundreds of hours, and even now, many people are helping. Lawyers, legal experts, academic experts, many people externally, ministers, many people have helped. And even now, we have a team, we have building an administrative team, we have an executive director, so it's great. So many people are already doing a lot of work.
So it's already some kind of like an ecosystem endeavor.
Yeah, it's starting. Yeah. It's kind of like building up. Oh, there is, if you list the people who have helped INSAIT, these are hundreds of people whose names are not even public. Yeah. They know. I think at some point they will be. But I'm not doing this myself. You cannot do anything here, only yourself. You always have to work with people. True.
I know that you practice judo together with your kids, right?
They also practice. We don't practice together, but
well, not against each other. But you go to the same. How is it called? Judo place.
Shun Judo Club.
Shun Judo Club. Is this a way for you to a life hack for you?
Yeah, judo is definitely part of my lifestyle. That's one of the things I wish I had more time for. I also did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I did for quite a few years. But then,
Georgi, none of my co-hosts will be very happy to hear that.
I think these are fantastic sports. Both of them. Judo is amazing. I have a lot of friends from it. Both my kids do it. But that's really, those kind of sports really allow me to disconnect. I just can't disconnect from all these things otherwise. Intensely disconnect.
So it is possible for you to disconnect.
Definitely, I disconnect this way. So if I don't do it for some period, I get very tense. So I like to do it. So just I disconnect, so I can look at the problems from a different direction.
And these plans that you have for the rest of the little time that you have here on Earth.
Yeah.
How big they are?
The rest of the plans.
Do you have them in your head somewhere?
I don't. I think many people make these plans of the future, but I think is what I said one time. It's like Einstein said, I don't think of the future; it comes soon enough.
Okay.
So I just want now INSAIT to be great, to take place, to see the really strong students there, to see the strong faculty. Not for myself, because for me. If I want to do world-class research, to optimize world-class research, I can. I don't need INSAIT or world-class startups. This is all optimized at ETH. I can do that. But INSAIT is like a mission, I think, for beyond the startup. It's really for the country, for Bulgaria, and I think for the region. So I really want this to succeed. I think this is the main thing.
It is a project which is of long-term impact, and it will even outlive you and me.
Hopefully, definitely.
So I guess my question would be, in your life, do you envision the moment when you, look at it and say, okay, I made it, or it is successful? How do you envision the moment of success of INSAIT, and how does it look like?
Oh, it's very clear from the beginning. Yeah. I mean, this is as I said, it has to be analogous to those places, these top places. So
how would you know that it's there?
It's this. If you look at, of course, there's all kinds of procedures, results. Of course, there's metrics. You can measure how many results. These kind of things you have.
Yeah.
But there is a magic around those places, which goes beyond the metrics. What this guy told you about the problems, what kind of problems you work on. There is something beyond metrics, which there's a word in the US which is called mindshare, which I haven't seen used in Bulgaria or even in the entrepreneurial circles.
Yes.
And this mindshare business goes beyond money, beyond anything. It's like, if you look at something like big projects, maybe like, let's say, self-driving car or like robotics, some robot doing something that's done for the first time, this generates a lot of mindshare. It's done for the first time. And so I am thinking about it in this way, like INSAIT. When you look at INSAIT, it's kind of like a nice painting. You say, hey, is this a good painting or not? And people say, yeah, no, this is a great painting, but you can't explain why it's a great painting. you know, beyond the metrics. It's like, oh, you know, the colors are used in this balance and all that is sure. So there is, of course, the objective measures. You know, what kind of scientists, how high it's up the ranking, how many students, how many papers, how many startups, this and that. And this is good. This is very good for being very good, but it's not enough for the high end. And for the high end, you need this magic. And I hope that when I look at INSAIT one day and say,
you would feel the magic.
Yeah, you know, this is like when people enter. You know, when we were at IBM Research, when people would enter, they said, "You guys are having so much fun. We can't believe anything gets done here, even though there was like so many things coming out." So you feel the magic, you know, and you want to enter and you say, "Yeah, I want to be here." That's what you want to feel.
Okay. I love your idea.
Yeah.
We have this question that we ask at the end to our guests, and I'm curious about your answer. So you have taken this Herculean task to build a research center, which, as I said, I hope it will outlive all of us, and it will have a major impact on our societies here in the region. Is this what you want to be remembered for, or what is it that you want to be remembered for?
I think INSAIT is just, you know, all these things we've done. The success that you have it doesn't really belong to you. It belongs to other people. There's nothing really that we own per se. For me, the main thing is helping people. Like, you know, when it's said and done, I say, you know, I work with this guy and he made me better. Okay. That's it.
Well, I guess building an academic, an educational institution is exactly putting you in the right position.
Right, academic institutions, but also I am working on other projects, which are not in academia, which I'm excited about, also in the area of sports and you know, music. So I'm very excited about many things, not just about academia and research and startups. And I think a lot of the structuring experience and how it works in this high tech and so on can be transferred. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs can transfer their knowledge and entrepreneurship spirit and ability to structure things and drive things and so on into other areas, not just for a startup, but, you know, helping other people structure their life and their endeavors.
Marty, thank you really much for this conversation. It's been very insightful for me to look a bit inside your brain because I know this public figure of yours, but you know, knowing your path, knowing how you started, I guess you do have some special talents, but after all, you also have this very normal background, like all of us. And then seeing what kind of magic you can do with the background that you have is very, very inspirational. So thank you for this conversation.
Thank you very much for the time, yes.
In the next episode of the Recursive podcast, we welcome the community builder and co-founder of Founderhood, Dimitris Dimousiaris.
I believe exactly the opposite.
Okay, good.
That, you know, in a very big ecosystem which is very mature, the best will stand out. But in a very mature system, or when you don't have the market here in Greece, the market is mostly funded by the government, by the European Union and stuff like that. So you don't have a lot of market conditions like in a normal market. So you cannot get the best feedback in a lot of things. Of how to build your product, how to develop it. And you have a lot of obstacles also. When we had, for example, don't get it even to the company level, when you get it into the organization level, when we're building Mindspace, for example, which is, a student organization inside a university, and the university should support it, for example, something like that. We had exactly the opposite. The whole university pretty much fighting. There you had the left students who fight.
And if you're just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.